So here we are at the farm. This is the Family Reunion 2012. Nancy, if you could just give us some background on, so what is your full name?
Nancy Mary Hirsch Griffith.
Where were you born?
I was born in Ithaca, New York. My dad, George Hirsch, was an Army officer, a career Army officer, and he was teaching ROTC at Cornell University when I was born.
What rank did he have?
When he retired, he was a colonel, full colonel.
Okay. And so how many children in the family?
We were three. I had one brother, George Walter Hirsch Jr., who was, we always called him Buddy. He was 9 years older than I, and my brother Tom was 6 years older than I, and then I came along. I was the little angel. Mm-hmm. My mother used to call me the little angel, and she'd dress me in little pinafores, things, and I had to take piano lessons, and I would give little, she would organize little recitals for the neighbor ladies to come over and have tea, and I would play a couple of things, you know, and I had these blonde curls. I've got a picture of me looking like a little princess girl. I was the little angels, and my brothers would say, yeah, the little angel.
So how did you ever, schooling, what kind of schooling did you have?
I went to kindergarten when we were stationed at Aberdeen Proving Ground on the shores of Chesapeake Bay, and then we were stationed in Columbia, South Carolina, where my dad, and this was 1940, I guess, or yes, it must have been 1940, where my dad was part of a team that was reviving an old closed army base, and so they were opening it all up and making it functional.
So did you go to college?
I went to college. We were in Hawaii. Well, my dad left from Columbia because he was stationed to the Philippines. Mm-hmm. And he left in May of 1941 on the first boat that would not take Army dependents with him. They usually shipped the whole family over to wherever they were stationed. They wouldn't take dependents to the Philippines, so we stayed in Columbia, South Carolina, where we were living in town. There was no Army quarters available to us because the Fort Jackson was the name of the station that had been shut down that was being reopened. So we just stayed there during the war, and my father was captured by the Japanese when they invaded the Philippines, and after bombing, Pearl Harbor Day. They also bombed the Philippines on the same day, and also Singapore and Shanghai, I think it was. So all those major ports, they bombed all the same day. And they invaded the Philippines and captured my father.
How long was he a prisoner?
He survived the Bataan Death March, and he was a prisoner for 3.5 years.
Boy, that's a long time.
Yeah.
Hmm.
Yeah, and...
Did you know he was alive during that time?
No. Well, not for the first 1.5 years. Mm-hmm. We got a message generated by the Red Cross, I think.
How did that imprisonment ever affect his life?
It didn't seem to affect it much at all after he came home and just kind of stepped into the regular American scheme of things, except that he was in a technical, I don't know the word for it, division. It wasn't a division, but department of the Army. He was ordnance. And there were so many advances made. The ordnance is a technical people who design bombs and explosives and things like that. There was so much new developments during the war that he used to say, "I'm a back number now." That's how he referred to himself. "I'm just a back number now. I can't, I can't learn all the things that I need to know to be a high-ranking, decision-making ordnance officer." And and it was true. And the Army just gave us I don't want to depreciate him, but the first active duty he did after he came back from the war, I was 12 years old when he came back, so I was more or less oblivious of the significance of his imprisonment. He had left when I was 6.5 years old or so, and he was just gone all that time. And it was just a word, to describe where he was. But I really didn't understand imprisonment until later, much later. In fact, even now, I'm, after the experiences of the Gulf War and the Iraq and Iran stuff, I realize that this situation of people who are prisoners of war is just indescribable. I can't imagine the depression and
and the depression, but also the death march. What kind of conditions did he have to deal with?
He stood in line on the remains of a cement floor of an aerodrome for 19 hours one time to get a drink of water. And he had the Hirsch. Do you have the Hirsch blisters on the feet? But when you get new shoes, do you get blisters on your feet?
My feet get sore.
I used to, because the shoes didn't fit. They were used shoes from the other Hirsches.
Yeah. Well, he got blisters. He had very tender feet. I get blisters too, sometimes. But his feet, when on marches and training and stuff, his feet would get hot, and he would have blisters. And my brother Tom had this too. And the shoes had this little wingtip kind of thing with all the little holes in it, the decorative holes. They'd take a drill and they'd drill the holes all the way through, so there'd be some ventilation for the toes. But anyway, he had horrible problems with blisters on his feet all the time, and that must have been a factor too. But of the ordnance men, officers and men stationed in the Philippines, in Manila, there were 64 officers and men. 56 died and 8 lived. And that's exactly a proportion of 7 died to each one who lived. And he was one of the ones who lived. But he was always strong and healthy. And the only physical mark was that he had lost a tooth, one tooth. But he was always hungry. And he used to sweep out, he used to volunteer to sweep the mess hall after they ate their soup. And the soup had the rice had worms in it, really disgusting worms, about an inch long and about the thickness of a pencil, and they had black heads, he said. And he would fish and he had a bowl, he brought his bowls home. Tom took those bowls also, along with the canteen he had. My brother Tom took he carried that stuff all through his life, and my brother Tom took them, and then they were lost and Tom doesn't know where they are. So, but anyway, he had this rice bowl, and he said he would rim the rice bowl with the worms who had been killed by the boiling hot soup, and then he would eat the rest, close his eyes and eat it. He wasn't hungry enough to eat all of the worms, I guess. But, he used to sweep the mess hall and look for something extra to eat. And he had, the officers weren't supposed to do manual labor. This is part of the old ideas of the difference between officers and men and stuff like that. And he was cutting grass. The Japanese made the officers also work. But he had a job of cutting grass. He had a top of a tin can to cut grass with on his hands and knees. And he said there were chickens around there, and a chicken laid an egg right close to where he was cutting grass. It's the only egg he had for 3.5 years.
Ate it raw?
Oh, sure.
Yeah.
I'm sure he did.
Okay.
But he lost almost half of his body weight. He went to West Point and played football for the Army team when he was there. And he was a strapping, strong, 6'2" Hirsch boy who weighed 185, 190 pounds. And he got down to 112 pounds, I think it was. Almost half of his weight. And but he never had aches and pains and sicknesses and stuff. He just lost one, and then he regained his weight, and he seemed to be amazingly unscathed after all of that.
Now, how old was he when he died?
He was 63 when he died. No, I'm sorry. My husband was 63. My dad was 73.
Okay.
73. But he died from an abdominal complication. He had a sore that didn't heal. He had low blood pressure, which I think is a Hirsch characteristic. I have low blood pressure. My brother Tom had low blood pressure. Mark, you had low blood pressure. You had low blood pressure? And so our feet get cold, the circulation doesn't keep us warm or anything. And so if you get injured in your lower extremities, then you don't heal as easily. But anyway, he had a sore on his leg, and it didn't heal for a long time, and somehow or other he got some kind of abdominal complaint. I have no idea if it was related or not, but it happened at the same time. And he ended up, we were in Hawaii, and he ended up in Tripler Hospital, and there was something wrong with his liver, and they tried to, maybe, I don't know what was the matter. I don't know if it was a tumor or some kind of whatever. But he never recovered from that. They operated on him 3 times, and the 3rd time he didn't come out of it. But I was actually in Hawaii for the last 6 months of his life. He used to love to read the morning newspaper, and he got so sick that he couldn't read it, he couldn't see it, and then he couldn't hold it, And I had a friend who said to me, if you take me to work, you can have my car during the day. So I would take her to work and get the newspaper and go up and read the paper to my dad. He loved it. He really loved it. And then he said to me one time, during this period that the nights were long. You know, he wasn't really in pain, but he was sick. But he said the nights were really long. And we had just come back from a big major, a circumnavigation, you know, under sail, and we had just gotten our slides back, and we got a projector, and we'd go up to his place he was in a private room because of his rank, and we'd go up to his room. We could go up any time of the day or night. You know, we'd go up about 10 o'clock at night, and we'd sort pictures. We'd show him on the wall, you know, and we'd prop him up on the bed and say, "Oh yeah, remember that's when such and such happened," you know, and we'd tell stories, and he loved it. You know, we sorted our pictures night after night for I don't know, weeks. Then he got really sick. They decided to do one last surgery on him, and he didn't make it.
Mm-hmm. What year was that he died?
I didn't tell you the nature of his sickness too. The problem during this long period, I mean it seemed long for us, it was 3 months or so, was that the peristaltic movement in his gut that pushes the food through the whole, you know, tube system had stopped. And they couldn't get it started again. And they'd try him on liquids, and he'd throw up, and they'd try him on some kind of ground up pablum or something like that, and they could never get his digestive system working again. So that was related. My mother figured it, surely it was related to him having been starving and whatnot, but it's problematical, I don't know.
What year did he die?
He died in January 1970.
Okay.